Hi, welcome to episode 7 of the Illusion Breakdown series. And today we're going to talk about performing illusions on TV and AGT. That's right, the Got Talent shows. And today I have a very special guest all the way down under. He's Sam Powers. He's an illusionist. You've seen him on Australia's Got Talent, Illusionist 2.0. I've known him for a couple of years now. And we're going to have a great chat because he's got lots of experience in this field. Performing illusions for, of course, live crowd, live shows, but also on TV, not just on AGT, but whether it's TV spot, television interviews, media interviews. All this is really presenting your magic on TV, and we're going to talk about that. So, without further ado, let's say hi to Sam.
Hey,
hi, Sam.
JC. Hey, good to see you, JC. How's it all going?
All good. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. And hopefully, everyone's going to learn from yourself and our discussions on how to perform magic and illusions on TV.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, maybe give a quick introduction of yourself, maybe the type of magic you do in your primary performing markets.
Yeah, so working now predominantly as an international stage illusionist. So we've performed in 19 countries all around the world so far. Started out in the first 10 years working on the ships and then moved on to the next stage where I actually four-walled my own casino production show here in Australia for 6 years and 2,000 shows. From then, currently now I'm working in the illusionist, with 6 of the industry's best magicians, touring globally. We've just come back from Asia, which was fantastic. And when I'm not doing that, I'm making various TV appearances here in Australia and working on the high end of the corporate market for like gala awards nights, A-list private events, and have also carved a niche for performing for international motor vehicle launch events. So that pretty much sums up what I've been doing so far.
All right, lots of big stuff. And today we're going to focus on talking about performing magic for TV and illusion. So let's just be general first, and we'll talk about magic in general, both stage, close-up, illusions, not specifically illusions. But how's performing magic live different from presenting it on TV?
Yeah, well, I mean, these two environments really are truly worlds apart. There's a massive difference when comparing performing to a live audience to performing on TV. There is an equally big difference when it comes to performing on TV with a live studio audience. AGT is a good example of that. Sometimes there's no studio audience at all and you only have the cameras. In general, for TV, you should really always perform to the camera, not to the studio audience, even if that means sometimes exposing sight lines or mechanics to the studio audience or the crew. Sometimes that's the price you have to pay. But on top of that, there's 3 different formats of TV. You've got pre-recorded, you've got live to tape, and then you've got live to air. And you really need to select your material appropriately for each format. For example, it's much safer to perform when it's pre-recorded, especially when you're performing large-scale illusions. There's less risk. You can retape if something goes wrong. For example, it's very rare to see David Copperfield perform a grand-scale illusion live to air because it's much safer for him to perform to a pre-record for quality control purposes. Performing live to tape is essentially the same as performing live to air because you only have one shot to get it right. However, after the performance, the producers can cut and edit shots in the studio before going to broadcast, which is what they do on AGT before they go to the live shows. So this can go both in your favor and it can go against you. For example, when Kevin James auditioned for AGT, this really went in his favor because they cut the camera after the sawing in half table went off stage and they brought it back on. You didn't get to see that on TV, and it really made it the perfect act. But it can also go against you depending on how they cut it for a live to tape, like with Brett Daniels' audition piece on AGT, where the camera cut to a bad shot and exposed part of his act. So live to air is exactly that. What you are performing is being broadcast in real time, live to air, and there is absolutely zero margin for error. So you want to be performing your best material that you have your most confidence about when you're performing live to air.
Okay, so we talked about you're talking really about many different types of formats. So let's talk about someone who's, I guess, getting a first or second opportunity to performing on TV. So obviously they should perform stuff they're very familiar with, very comfortable with. Now let's talk about the sightlines because in magic, depending on what you perform, as you said, angles can be tricky. For a live show, we always control it for our live audience in our staging and our blocking or in the venue we perform. So we know all this beforehand. Now we go on TV and we have, let's say we're performing a particular act. Let's say I'm doing a card act. So I'm doing back palming. So obviously I don't want bad angles to show off the cards behind my hand. How do you manage this? Do you talk to the producers beforehand? Do you show them a demo tape? Or do you tell them, hey, this is a bad angle? How do you go about this process?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Especially when you're performing large-scale illusions on TV, or for that matter, anything angly like with your back palming, it's counterproductive to try and keep your secrets hidden from the producers and the camera guys, because without them having the knowledge of the mechanics or angle restrictions, they could unintentionally expose an aspect of the illusion or expose a sight line when you're back palming. So it's really, I had a really good conversation with Louis DeMartos about this, and I agree with him that it's very important to explain the technical aspects and all the angle restrictions to all the producers, the camera operators, and the floor crew, so that they are all aware of the possibilities that could possibly expose the illusion or the angles on TV. Also, in doing this, what you're doing is making them part of your team, and they'll do their best job to make you look good. So you really do need to sacrifice, your secrets to that small selective group of technical crew on TV that will overall make you look a lot better to, the masses that, are the television viewing audience.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When I talk to the TV crew or even a live stage crew supporting my show, you want kind of bring them into your circle and almost have them as part of a team. As you said, that's exactly what you said. And tell them that you need them to create this magic for the audience who's ultimately the beneficiary of the TV show, the live show that you're doing. So yeah, bring them in, have them be part of your inner circle for that particular project.
Absolutely, so, I think it's very important. I agree. Yep.
So would you say do you have the time then to show them a video? Do you show them the act? Do you do a blocking first, or how would you? I guess we're already talking about the nuts and bolts of the process. I know each show would be different, but just by and large, let's not talk about AGT, but let's talk about maybe you're going in for a media interview. You're doing a morning a show where you're going to be maybe doing a short interview as well as performing a piece of magic. So how would you produce? How would you approach this from the start where you get to the event? Of course, you've set it up, I guess, earlier with, talks over the phone or over email in terms of what you're going to do, how long is your set. But let's talk about, getting to the studio that day and, first meeting the producers.
Sure. I guess it depends on the environment and how much time you have. If you're on location shooting something, or if you're in the studio shooting something, and the amount of time that you're being given to work with. So, for example, if we were doing a live to air weather cross, and the broadcast crew is on location somewhere, like in the theatre or somewhere that's not in the studio, and they have a very short amount of time typically to even give you a camera rehearsal and run it. So in those circumstances, the best you can do really is just explain to the camera operators where the bad angles begin, so what restrictions they have, so where they'll get their best shots, and keep them within the confines of that space. Now, if you're in an environment where you're in the studio and you've got more time, yes, what you want to do is you just do a camera run, so they can physically see the act and see what it looks like, and then coach them through the process. You can explain, well, if you're doing mirror tunnel, for example, this is where the mirror is. These are the angles that are going to be bad. That's not going to be good for TV. You want to stop right here and shoot it from this angle, and just take it as in a case-by-case example. So whatever time you're given will dictate how far you can go and explain those restrictions to the crew.
Great points. I should mention, Sam, you're very experienced, so very confident, and you know your craft as well as with, all, top professional magicians or illusionists. So I guess my advice for the people who are just starting out, you need to be confident in what can or cannot be done, because often the people who are working in the productions, the seasoned cameraman or the producers or the directors, I find at times they can be a bit, a bit uppity in the sense that, hey, don't tell me how to do my job. I've been in TV for 20 years. I've seen it all, even though they have no idea how to film magic. So I'd say as someone who's new, you would have to really know and be confident and be firm. If you feel unsure, that's when they probably aren't going to really listen to you, right, Sam?
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point. It's also about having good people skills. And when you're arriving on set, just to have really good people skills and, the way you manage the crew and not look like a prima donna and admire what they're doing in their world. And for example, when we went into studio to shoot the sub trunk, so we did we actually only got to do half a camera run. So because the time was so restricted, so we got to run the trunk to the point where I'm locked in, the lid's down, girl goes on top, and we switch. And this camera run was actually conducted during the commercial break before we go back live to air, and then we do our spot. And so what happened then is that was enough for the producers because the time restrictions were in place. So when we went to shoot the trunk in its entirety live to air, the funny thing that happened was the shots were all lined up properly, the lighting cues happened, the camera guy was on a front-on shot to get the switch in frame perfectly. But what he didn't know is that when I switch and I'm standing on the trunk now, I then jump off the trunk and then go and get the key and unlock it. But the camera guy is now literally like on hand and knee in front of the trunk, like shooting it like this. And I had to jump over the camera guy because we didn't see this part of the rehearsal because that's where the camera rehearsal stops. So I jumped over the camera guy and the camera's like, whoa, what's going on here? And then go and get the key and then unlock. So that's an example where if we had another 10 seconds of time, we could have fixed that problem. But that could have become a disaster depending on how that unfolded. So always get as much time as you can to ensure that producers are fully prepped and understand exactly what's going on, if possible.
All right, that's a great story.
Yeah.
Now, any advice in terms of material that one should choose? I mean, obviously they should choose stuff that they're really comfortable with, and they know in and out. Now, would you choose material if it's different, whether it's live to tape or if it's live TV or it's pre-recorded? And let's not talk about your own TV show where everything's set up for you. So we're talking about you going into someone else's show and performing.
Yeah, sure. Look, as a general rule of thumb, when you're performing on TV, you need to be performing the material that you are most confident in, material that you have performed hundreds or thousands of times before in your sleep, because when you enter the TV environment, everything changes. The dynamics are different. You're out of your comfort zone, and you don't have your security blanket that would normally be there in your preferred environment. And when your environment changes so dramatically, it really can affect the performance because you're no longer in your comfort zone. So unless you really know this material very, very well and you're extremely confident, it can fall apart. And we've all seen it happen, over the years from time to time when, magic goes wrong on TV. So don't try and be too ambitious and perform the world's latest and greatest magic trick that you've practiced half a dozen times at home the day before. Really go in with your best material that you are most confident with, that you know you can perform in your sleep. And that way it's pretty hard to go wrong.
You talked earlier about how performing, for a live audience and a TV, it's very different because TV, you might have a live studio audience, you might not have. They could just be cameras or could be a studio audience. And as a live performer now, you may be very experienced performing live. You've rehearsed it in your bedroom, in your studio. But, going out in front of the cameras, especially if it's a studio, and you see 4 or 5 cameras, you see crew, you see, even if it's a studio audience, they could be, they're behind really the line of the cameras. It's really a completely different environment. Giving you advice of how to rehearse or prepare for this.
Yeah, well, look, I guess I've been lucky in the past because I've come off the bat of performing 6 nights a week for the last 6 years. And so every time I would go into performing for a TV appearance, in my casino show the night before, I would actually stop the show and go, right, now guys, we've got something really special. Tomorrow I'm going to be appearing on the Today Show or whatever the show might be. And right now we're going to pretend that we're in the studio, we're about to go live, and we're going to show you a sneak peek of exactly what you're going to see on TV tomorrow. And then I would actually bring in like an MC type of host that would come in and introduce the spot. So for me, it's a selfish thing because I now get to be in the exact mindset of being in the studio and having someone introduce me the way it would happen on TV, and I would perform the act and interact with that person as a host. Now, obviously, if you don't have your own show every night, there's other ways of doing this. I would bring in friends or family or set up an environment where you're basically rehearsing in the same manner and environment as your TV appearance would be the next day. So you're basically, envisioning, seeing exactly and experiencing exactly what it's going to be like the next day. So that way, when you get to the TV studio, it's the second time you've done it. You're much more confident. You've done it, and you really you feel a lot more confident. So that's my little secret. Every time I do TV, I do it in the same manner the day before, and that way it just feels very natural when we go live to air.
No, great advice. I mean, yeah, replicating the environment, whether you're doing TV or, any other type of show, because often when we rehearse, in your bedroom, in your studio, you get this comfort zone and it's a false security. So I would do the same. I'll set up, so you set up tripods, you set up, lights, I'll put chairs, you put stuffed toys, different points of the room, just to kind of replicate that environment so that, you never, of course, 100% be able to replicate it, but, it does prepare you. Great point.
Yeah.
Is there any difference between performing illusions, grand illusions, over, let's say close-up magic or parlor magic when it comes to TV?
Well, I guess the biggest difference is that grand illusions are more demanding on production. So in addition to the taping of the material, there's a lot of production that needs to be set in place first and teched and rehearsed in terms of lighting, staging, sound, all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're going on performing close-up magic, you really have no production requirements apart from the fact that you're mic'd up and then you're performing your material. So if you're performing grand illusions on TV, there's pyrotechnics, there's lighting, there's all that kind of stuff that you need to take into consideration the same way you would in a traditional theatre show. But all those elements need to come together perfectly after your camera rehearsal so that when you go live to air, it's all going to gel. So I'd say, yeah, the big difference is those, those production requirements that you would obviously supply in your production rider to the network prior to entering the studio. So they're prepped and ready to go. And it'll make your camera rehearsal and your teching much quicker and much more streamlined.
Great point. So a rider is basically just your technical requirements where you list down very clearly what you need or what you're going to do. And this includes even loading space, because some TV studios are deceptively small. They look big on TV, but they're actually really small, and they may not even have proper loading facilities. So make sure they can always load in your gear if you're doing big illusions.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Sam, Sam, we're going to talk about AGT. All right. So this question is two-part. How did you get on personally, and how does one generally get on? I mean, I'll just give you an example from myself. I've been emailed multiple times over the years for America's Got Talent, and they specifically tell me, okay, we want you for one episode. So, which is why I've always turned it down. So in my case, it's always I'm approached and invited to be on the show. I know similar stories from other acts as well, but let's hear your take.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, this is it's different for everybody. For me, the producers of the show rang me every year for 5 years, and every year I had the same response: no thanks. But after the 5th year, it was due to a network change that we actually agreed to partake in the show for strategic reasons not related to this webinar. But in general, for a magician who has not been specifically contacted by the producers, it's just a simple matter of responding to their audition call, and you turn up on the day to perform your act. Now, this is not the televised audition. This is just the audition where the producers are present in a hall somewhere, and they'll take away your material and decide if they wish to have you partake in the televised audition. It was interesting. I sat in with the producers of AGT over the duration of an entire audition day, where they scan the new talent and watch act after act, some good, some bad. And, there was a lot of "don't call me, we'll call you" going on that day. So, yeah, that's, and sometimes there's videotape submissions as well, where you won't be required to come into audition. They'll just request a videotape, you send that in, and you'll get a response from there as to whether you're going to go through to the televised auditions.
Okay, that's great, because there are, some people who think that there's no way you can get on the show unless you have an agent who books you on the show. So it is actually possible to get on in, I guess, what you call open auditions, right?
That's right. Anyone, they're always looking for new talent in those open auditions, because they're also looking, and I'll get onto this later on, they're also looking for really bad acts that think that they're good acts that they'll ridicule on TV, and we'll discuss that later and how all that works as well.
All right, great. Now, how did you choose the material that you performed on the show? And did you give a list of acts to the producers and they kind of requested, okay, we'd like you to do this for your first audition, we'd like you to do this, or did you have full creative control?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess the first thing I did was study every single audition piece ever performed on AGT, Australia, America, and Britain. It was epic. That was my life for months. Then I looked at the acts that made it through to the next round and the material that they performed in that round, and then again for the semis and final performances. So when it came to selecting material, it was clear to me that I had to work backwards from the grand finals through to the audition. The difficult part was ensuring that the material for the audition was strong enough, but not your best material, which you should really save for the later rounds. So the biggest mistake I noticed when magicians were auditioning for AGT is that their act either started too slow, or it lacked pace throughout, or they were just trying to do something long and dramatic, like floating table, for example. For an illusionist, the audition piece really needs to be quick and snappy and visual and strong. And you need to have your first wow moments very early in the piece and continue building from there with several more wow moments building up to a climax. Of course, there's always exceptions to this rule, but depending on the material. But as a general rule of thumb, this is what consistently gets the magic acts through the audition. So once we had our material selected for each round, we sent it off to the producers. However, and this was crucial for us, we made sure we had a commitment from the producers that they could supply the production that we needed for each act, including the grand final act, before we ever agreed to do the show. Now, this was so important because, as you may recall, in my finals act, I did a visual transformation of a Mini Cooper into a Ferrari with a shadow morph. This is a piece never before seen in magic. And this was also very demanding on production. It was going to cost them, a fortune to, put the production in place to make it happen. But unless I was able to perform that particular piece, I wasn't interested in doing AGT, because otherwise I'd have very little to offer that was different to any other magician that had really appeared on the show before. So when the producers took away my production writers and did their budgets and agreed they could make it happen, it was then and only then that I agreed to do the show. I knew they really, really wanted me on the show, so I was in a pretty good position to negotiate. So yeah, essentially I had full creative control for the most part of it. But I know this is definitely not the case for a lot of acts, having spoken to many other acts, especially in the American show, where they don't have that same creative control, where the producers will insist that they do X, Y, Z. So I guess I was lucky in that respect.
Yeah, I have heard about that. I mean, they basically dictate, like you do these acts, and they did for various reasons, just so that they could, give a reason to, let's say, knock them out in the semis. Okay, in terms of your audition act, your first act, was that the Instant Babe and the Spike Cabinet?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
So that was something you chose to do as the auditions?
Yeah, it was. And that kind of changed several times. I initially thought, well, maybe we should audition with the trunk because it's so visual and it's so fast. But then, we need something strong for later on down the track. So we ended up deciding on Instant Babe and Light Spiker as a kind of speed illusions number because they're both very quick. It's an instantaneous production of a girl, and then she vanishes and reappears, and the props look sexy. And so we had to work that act down into 90 seconds because in our casino show, we would do Instant Babe in like a minute 10, and then Light Spiker would take 3 minutes. That was like 4 minutes. So we had to get new music, new choreography, cut it all down into 90 seconds. And it was actually a really good learning experience to do that because that's now how we do it every show, like in the Illusionists. And it's very quick and snappy. So so that ended up being a good choice for us for the audition piece.
Is the default limitation 90 seconds? Is that the standard? I mean, can you go over 90 seconds or it has to be 90 seconds?
So look, I guess depending on the program, in Australia, it's 90 seconds, but the producers said, look, if you perform for 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes, that's fine. They will just cut it down to the 90 seconds. But I wanted control of the act. So I wouldn't have control if I performed for 2.5 minutes, which parts would they cut out and what parts would they use. So we just brought it down to the 90 seconds of airtime that we were allocated and went from there. So, but I have heard acts audition for 3 minutes, for example, and the producers will cut that to their desired airtime.
Okay, I think it can be inferred that you kind of knew that you would progress in the show. So when you planned your material, you kind of planned it for different rounds. So 2 questions, I guess. One, how many rounds did you have to perform to prepare for? I mean, you needed to know at least how many times you needed to perform at the minimum. So you need to prepare that. Yep. And I guess for the the average guy who's trying to get on the show who hasn't necessarily been called, how should they prepare? Because if I'm not sure if I'm going to advance and I have maybe 1 or 2 good acts, so my thinking is maybe I should just do my good act so that if I don't get on, if I don't advance, at least I have footage of my good act. So how would we juggle that? So I know it's a 2-parter, so we can talk about yourself first, and then we'll talk about, what might apply to the average guy.
Sure. So first, let me clarify that there was never any conversation or agreement that I would automatically go through from the auditions. Even though the producers contacted me to be on the show, I straight up asked them, I said, look, I don't want to look like an idiot on the show. I don't want to be buzzed off during the auditions. Can we have an agreement that I'll at least get through to the next round? That never happened. Now, I have heard people tell me that that has happened for them. I certainly didn't experience that on the show. So I still had to strategize that maybe I'd get knocked out in the audition. But thinking in the big picture, if the producers had been contacting someone like myself for 5 years to do the show, they would clearly want you to go through. They need some magic content. So I was pretty confident that unless we stuffed up the act, that we would go through. So we, from there, we had to strategize, right, what's next? How many rounds do we need to go through? Now, there was a network change on my season where it went from network 7 to 9. And 9 were kind of trying to minimize their risk taking on this show. So they cut the season down from previous years. So instead of going audition, quarterfinal, semi-final, grand final, there was one less round. So we only had to go audition, semi-final, grand final. And that was it. So there were 3 spots we had to focus on. So after the audition spot, we had to decide the act and the material for the semi-final, and then decide if that material should be our best, or should we gamble that maybe we'll get through to the grand final and use our best material in the grand final. So my strategy was, let's go out with a bang on the semi-final. If we get through and do the semi-final, I want to make sure that beyond the audition, Australia gets to see our best material. So my strategy was never to win the show. It was to get 1 or 2 good TV spots that I could put on my YouTube channel. So we strategized that our best material would be the semi-final. And if we got through to the grand final, we still had good material for grand final, but not as strong as the semi-final. And the second reason for deciding on that strategy was we were pretty confident that based on years gone by at that stage, it was really only the singing acts that would win the show, because the singers would get the record deal and the producers would all cash in on that component. So I figured, even if I did use my best material for the grand final, would that still give me a chance to win the show? Back then, probably not. It's only been the last couple of years that magicians have really gone through and won this show. But in years gone by, my season was 2013. That had never happened before. So we were pretty confident that we'd use our best material for semi-final and be happy if we got any further from there.
Okay, so in this case, well, that's pretty clear. And I guess that most people can kind of adopt that same strategy as well. First thing is, of course, to know exactly how many rounds they're going to be for your particular country's Got Talent, or whatever reality competition style show it is, and then plan the material. It's great to have some kind of objective. The show, is it to get good promo reel? Is it to get more Facebook likes, YouTube views? What is your ultimate purpose? I think that's very important for each individual to decide and to figure out how you're going to be perceived as seen at different stages of the particular show.
Well, that's right. Yeah,
advice.
And I think that you made a very good point there too. I mean, one thing we're going to look at a little bit later on is your purpose for doing the show. Have you got a tour coming up? Are you got a theatre show? Do you want to increase your corporate profile? The power of TV is it's big. You can't really beat it, and you can't just go on the show for fun. It's very difficult for a site act to get time on TV, and AGT can be a very good platform to launch you to the next level. So what you're saying is true. Have a purpose and intent for going on the show. Know exactly why you're doing it, and then utilize that to launch your act to the next level. So yeah, really good point.
Okay, let's get to some interesting stuff now. So, were the AGT producers, the staff, the crew helpful to you in your personal journey? Did they have your best interest in mind, or did you feel that they're really there just to make good TV and they'll do whatever it takes to make a good TV show? You can talk about your personal experiences or what you might have observed behind the scenes.
Sure. So how dirty do we want to get here? That's the question.
Do you want to go back on the show?
So I think overall the producers were very helpful all the way through to the point in the show where they had storyboarded us in the series. Now, what you got to understand is that AGT is not a talent show. It's a TV show.
It's not. It's Got Talent.
and a TV show. And so a TV show is a business, which is all about making money with a network and the production company, Fremantle, partner together to make big money. And like I mentioned before, up until recent years, the big money was always made from the record deal signed to the singing act, who would always win the show. So the producers, what I learned was that they once they've got their audition pool together, they storyboard the show like you would storyboard a movie or, you know, a theatre show. And it's the same in this show. So what happened, they were, the producers were overall very helpful to ensure that our audition looked great and that our semi-finals piece looked great. This included ensuring that the correct production was in place, and ensuring the coaches, the judges, the producers coached the judges to say complimentary things about the act.
They are coaches?
So what I fumbled on my words. The producers coach the judges what to say. So the judges know whether to be positive about an act or negative or indifferent. So
do the on-screen judges judge, or do the producers tell them basically, okay, this act is going to make sure that at least, you know, three of you say yes?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're ever there, I mean, it's very transparent. I mean, on the floor in between acts, the producers come out to the judge table and there's a 3 or 4 5-minute conversation that occurs between them, and then the next act comes out. And so, James Moore was telling me about this as well, to the point where even to the exact second when one particular judge will hit the red buzzer, has been coached prior to the act coming on. So, I mean, it's a TV show that requires, a story and an ending to go to, and that's the way.
Dramatic tension, suspense, everything that goes in great.
Yeah.
So just to quickly interrupt. Yeah. So basically, for everyone out there, the judges are also on-screen talents. They are part of the talents.
That's a very good point
so
too.
Bear that in mind.
That's right. For the judges, this is profile building for the judges. This is really, for the judges, exactly. It's actually all about them and not about the talent, disguised as it being about the talent. So you've got to take that dynamic into consideration as well. So yeah, that's a very good point. So
you're talking about, the producers basically were very helpful, in helping you look good in the show.
I mean, that's a whole nother story. I mean, overall, yes. Once we actually, like I mentioned before, we had agreed to do the show based on the producers saying yes, that they could supply the production for the big car illusion. After we taped the audition, we started conversations about production for the car, and they came back and said, look, I'm sorry, we've just redone the budgets. We can't afford to do it. You've got to do something else. And I'm like, well, that wasn't the deal. If I can't do the car, I'm out. I'm not doing your show. And this was a massive big ordeal that went on to the point where I nearly, dropped out of the show. And but they ended up coming back.
Being a diva, okay.
Yeah, but it's not even being a diva because we'd made the agreement prior to.
It's a deal, yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't going to I just that was the deal. So and it was, I had to be very delicate about it. Not throwing a tantrum, just trying to have a mature dialogue with the producers about the reasons why we want to do this, how it's going to be great for the show, something that the Australia has never seen before, and we eventually got there. So apart from that, they were overall very quite cooperative to make it happen. It was a battle at times, but overall it was good. They ensured that everything was in place, but all the way through to the semi-finals, which is where in my I guess probably my educated guess would be where our storyboard ended. So from that point on, it was time for the singing act to shine through and win the series. So the producers, this is all my opinion, by the way, which with my team and I have discussed in depth, and we really believe this, so that the producers did a number of things from that point on to ensure that we didn't have a chance to go through and shine the way we did prior to. So first of all, it's important to understand that for that semi-final act, we literally performed the most epic illusion act ever seen on AGT, with that, starting with the self-production in the Mini Cooper to a Pendragon Speed sub-trunk, to the Shadow Morph for the Mini Cooper into the Ferrari, and then to a self-teleport where I ended up back inside the Ferrari, which got a full standing ovation. It was great TV. And from there, I think the producers, started using tactics to make sure that that we didn't shine as bright from that point on. Once we made
What do you
it
mean by
to,
tactics?
so I'll give you a little bit of dirt. I don't want to give out too much dirt, but
Sure.
so once we made it to the grand finals, we were in a pool of 8 acts that could take out the show, including some singing acts. So the first thing they did was whenever an act wins their semi-final spot, the next morning they go on to the Today Show for an interview and whatnot. So we were the one and only act of those 8 that were not given a spot on the Today Show. Every other act was. So this gave us less attention and exposure than the singing acts. Next thing that happened was our grand final act was actually 4 minutes, and most of the grand final acts were 4 minutes. But the producers told us we had to cut our act down to 2 minutes. Strictly 2 minutes, that's all we're going to get, which meant not being able to do the epic stuff we had originally planned, which included a reappearance at the back of the house and a couple of things that you never saw on TV. Did the singers get 4 minutes for their grand final act? Yes, they did, every one of them. And but we were given 2. Next thing that happened was we had agreed for a 2-hour camera rehearsal on the day of the grand final shooting. So what had happened was we get there to do this on the day, and the cameras start rolling to shoot your rehearsals, so they've got content for the backstory video. And then one of the producers comes up to my face and goes, "Right, you've now got 30 minutes to do this, let's go." And I'm thinking in my head, hang on, we've got so much to do. We need 2 hours, it's only 30 minutes. But then the cameras come up to me and go, "So Sam, how are you feeling about your rehearsals?" And here I am frazzled, thinking, how are we going to do this? And so, clearly I was stressed out, but it's all about the producers creating drama to make good TV. And, that was interesting. Then it came time to shoot the grand final. And this is real dirt. And you know what? I'll give you the dirt because it's the truth and it's what actually happened.
Okay.
So it's hard to believe it, but it's what happened. So our grand final act was smoke chamber into a clear model soaring into a Lamborghini production, and our smoke chamber was flown up 20 or 30 feet into the air, and in the wings, I had my petrol chainsaw idling next to one of my crew, so that when the smoke chamber comes down, I appear, I jump out, soaring table comes out, there's a chainsaw, we move straight into it. So I'm hidden in the base of the smoke chamber, 30 feet in the air. I can hear my chainsaw idling in the wings. And then they play the video package, which goes for a minute, and then we start the performance. And all of a sudden, I hear this chainsaw getting run out backstage, out into the car park, and then it's silent. And I'm thinking, what the hell has happened? Is someone running my chainsaw out the back? Has the building caught on fire? Is something wrong? Are we doing this? And it completely got me by surprise. And so then the music started and it was time to go. And this was my first time ever doing smoke chamber, by the way, and I was stressed out. And anyway, we get there, and sure enough, the chainsaw is on stage just in time. Now, at the end of it, my right-hand guy, I said to him, "What happened?" And he told me he heard the comm call from the executive producer to the stage manager. He heard the comm call come through to say, "Get the chainsaw and take it outside." And this guy ran the chainsaw out into the car park. And so if I didn't have my right-hand guy, that he ran out and chased the guy, grabbed the chainsaw, ran it back to the stage just in time for it to come on for the clear soaring. Now, I bet you the producers had coached the judges to say, thinking that I wouldn't have a chainsaw and that I was going to try and just air cut my girl in half without a chainsaw. And I can bet you they would have said something to the judges like, "Hey, Sam, your act would have been better if you used something like a chainsaw to cut the girl in half," and just to, create more of that drama. So that was something that was absolutely mind-blowing to me, that they actually called that chainsaw, having seen the camera rehearsals that we used the chainsaw to run off into the car park for no actual reason. So that was the other thing that happened. And the next thing they did was in the week leading up to the voting lines for grand finals, the 8 acts that were up to take out the show were all included in the TV commercial that played for 7 days. all except for one act, and that was me. So I was the only act out of the 8 that were not included in the TV commercials that week, which was also very interesting. And the final thing that happened was, against all the odds, we actually did a flawless grand final spot. It was actually precision perfect. The Lamborghini was perfect. Everything was great. But it was clear that the producers had coached the judges to each have something awful to say about the act, even though we pulled it off. And going from the previous act and the auditions where they were like, wow, Sam, yeah, that was great, we love you, to, wow, we just don't think that was all that great. And so it was clear that the producers had coached those judges to say, and that was it. So there's a bit of dirt, but you know what? They're the things that the producers need to do to ensure the show goes the way they want, to make good, interesting TV content, and that's what happened. So we're kind of lucky we came out and survived the way we did, because it could have been a lot worse, that's for sure.
No, great story, great experience. I've talked to many people as well, and I've been part of lots of TV shows. I think the takeaway really for anyone who is interested to go on such a show is just bear in mind, it is a TV show. It's not a competition show. It's there to find out who's the best talent. It is there to create TV, and they'll do likely almost anything to make you look good or look bad or what, basically manipulate the outcome as they seem fit. Of course, you can try to minimize it by, well, number one, do a great act, so that minimizes your damage. Producers tell acts to do certain things, and acts, aren't very comfortable, but they say, no, do it. It's going to be great, blah, blah, blah. And then when they do it, the judges shred them to bits. Have you heard of anything like that or seen anything like that?
Absolutely, yeah. I've got a friend of mine, a guy that went on Britain's Got Talent, and it was actually a step above that. They actually they paid funded this illusion, which was like $30,000 or $40,000 for this magician to perform.
Wait, did he get to keep it? Did he get to keep it?
Okay, yeah, he got to keep it. Yeah. And so they paid for it. They also scripted it. They costumed it, everything. And so that it was the producers that basically put this whole act together, and all the guy had to do was perform it just like they wanted. And then the judges came on and tore it apart. They spent $40,000 for the judges to come on and tear it apart. It was terrible, and that was the worst thing I've ever seen. But that's just how they make TV. So yeah. But
why do you think they would do that? I mean, that sounds really extreme.
Well, it's just what good TV is. I mean, good TV is not, when things just all go according to plan, like the cooking shows and the renovation shows. It's when things go wrong and there's drama and there's tension, there's conflict, and and then I imagine that they would hope that the talent would then argue back with the judges and go, no, all that conflict makes for great TV. I think that's what they were trying to achieve, and they did achieve that as well. It was exactly what they wanted. So that's the price they paid for good TV.
Did the talent argue back?
I can't remember. I've got a story coming up in a tick where the talent did argue back during an audition. But in fact, I do recall now, he did say something to the tune of, well, why don't you go argue with the producers? Which kind of he was giving away that the producers put that together, and I do think that went to air. I'm pretty sure that bit did go to air, but I was chatting with him, on Skype or something about it, and it was pretty extreme. It's like nothing I'd ever seen in the Australian series, that's for sure.
Well, they have a bigger budget.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Okay, we're going to wrap this up soon. Now, we obviously know what are the great things about being on AGT or any kind of mainstream TV show with exposure, helps with your branding, or just getting you out there, will help with your, regular bookings as well, because your profile has been raised. But of course, there's the downside, because if you don't look good on the show, it can also hurt you. Now, do you think that it can actually hurt you, or do you think that, with the nature of AGT, any acts, now even if for that 30 seconds or a minute where your audition didn't go well or the judges didn't have good things to say, Do you think that in the grand scheme of things really is negative performer, or could you and get clips of you performing in AGT, use, as seen on AGT, and just not worry about whether it was a good or bad performance? Because in the grand scheme of things, your clients or the general public, they aren't gonna really remember it unless you kill someone or killed yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty true. I mean, look, there have been a few magicians audition for AGT that haven't looked that great, like Brett Daniels and Rudy Kobe, for example. And this was mainly due to the way that the judges were coached to respond to their audition. For example, during the judges' comments for Brett Daniels' audition, judges were making fart jokes. I mean, so, well, I don't think this really caused any serious damage for either of those two performers. I can only really recall two instances where two separate magicians whose auditions were so horrible that I can't imagine it possibly doing any favors for their careers. There was a guy shooting a duck out of a cannon. I don't know whether you've seen this, and he had the second duck in the other table ready to go, and then before he shoots the duck out of the cannon, the second duck jumps out of the table and exposes that there's two ducks. But then it was the most horrible thing, and it was just you can't recover from that. But maybe because he was a comedy act, you could pull it off as, hey, it was just all part of the comedy of it. There was another guy that did something quite lame for his audition. It didn't go wrong. It was just a poor choice of material. I think it was a floating table, and the music was just really kind of corny. And he started arguing back with the judges, and it was that made him look bad. That's not really the kind of look you want to go for on TV. So they looked really, really bad. But I mean, other than that, if you have a good, strong act, it doesn't really matter what the judges say, because the TV audience can decide for themselves. And again, if the act is strong, it can't really do you any harm. I was aware of the way they cut the edits together, when the judges are making their comments, and so I was prepared. So for the grand final spot, when the judges started, criticizing my act and cutting me down, I basically smiled and nodded to everything they said, like they were complimenting me, because that gave the producers nothing to use on their edit. I didn't look back and go, "What are you talking about? They're fake legs. It's magic." There was nothing like that. And Jerry Halliwell was going on and on and on about fake legs. And I just kept smiling and nodding like, "Oh, thank you so much." And I gave them nothing. So you've got to be kind of smart like that too.
And I was actually thinking that you went a different path, but that's exactly what I would do. I mean, this is a TV show, so you smile, as though it's a compliment, and later when you do a promo reel, just take someone else's good comments.
Right, that's right.
What you say, and everything will be fine. I think, my take would be, you're right. If you aren't delusional and you actually have a decent act, and your purpose again is just to use this to raise your profile, just do it. If you don't go through and the judges' comments aren't great, just extract whatever you need from the TV spot for your promo. You have the scene on AGT, and that in itself can help. And you know what? The experience of just working on the show is something to take away as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, agreed.
Okay, I think that's basically about it. Anything else you want to talk about performing on AGT?
Yeah, look, I think just to kind of wrap it up, like advice for magicians, wanting to get on AGT. I think you need to have a good, hard, honest look at your act and, ask yourself, is this the kind of act that would be supported by the show or ridiculed by the show? Now, I know this kind of might sound funny, but there are many acts, not just magicians, who audition for AGT, not just AGT, like, X Factor and The Voice, thinking that they're amazing because their mum tells them they're amazing. But in reality, the act is quite weak, sometimes even comical. And the producers will prep the judges to ridicule that performance. I saw this when I sat in the auditions when that day I sat in with the producers when they were auditioning the acts, and they let in some really terrible acts. And I challenged the producer. I said to him, how can you have a conscience about knowing that this act is terrible, which it is, and putting them on the show? And he actually gave me a good answer. He said, Sam, I approach the act and I say to them, so have you shown other people your act? And they say, yep. And I said, and you know, and what have they told you about the act? And they say, well, my mum told me I was great. I showed my best friend and he said, you know, it was really, really good and I thought I'd try out. And he said, well, if that act believes in their heart that they are good, he'll accept them in the show knowing that they're terrible and knowing that they're going to get ridiculed, but that's what makes TV. So if you're confident that your act is strong, go ahead and audition, but make sure you've got a purpose for going on the show too, like we discussed earlier. You know, really use that powerful medium of TV to your full advantage and help get your act to the next level, and you know, and hopefully you'll be better off for it.
Good advice. I'll close with two things as well. One is, so choose acts that look good on TV, because acts that work live, it's very different from working TV. Live, we create drama, there's rapport with an audience, we can build it up. On TV, it's completely different. You almost stop. I said you have to really put in punch within 90 seconds or whatever short time you're allocated. So you have to think in terms of TV. You should actually film it and see how it looks like. One advice is film it and then sound and see how it looks like. See if it holds or captivates your attention. The other thing I'll add is, besides just working on the act as well, work on your expressions, your personality that's, conveyed through the camera. And often, even your act isn't good, but you have a good personality, that can make good TV as well. And there are actually acts who go through who aren't that good, but they're great personalities off stage and on stage with their, backstage interviews, or if they have a good story. So I've always said this to new talent. And it didn't apply to me, and I should have thought about this years ago. You need to come up with a great backstory. You lived in your car for 2 months before you had this opportunity. Your dog just died of cancer. Whatever, anything that makes you look bad, and you can rise up to shine. That's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear that, oh yeah, I've been doing magic for 20 years, started with a magic trick. Yeah, I've been doing shows all my life, built my way up. That's boring. You need to say, your cat got run over by a car, your dog died of cancer, you had to stop magic for 6 months. You never knew you could perform again, but you're back here in the saddle and trying to do this. Do you agree, Sam?
I agree, yeah. I mean, as long as you keep some kind of authenticity about it, so it maybe slightly relates to
No, this is TV. Nothing is authentic. Don't listen to Sam.
But yeah, but you're right. You need a good backstory. It's got to be interesting, and you need to come across as the undiscovered star, the next best thing that they started on your journey on AGT before anyone else ever knew you or heard about you, and now you're famous and they saw you from the beginning. That's the kind of vibe that the show wants to go for.
But then again, you're like in the current season of America's Got Talent, more than half of them are top pros in their field.
That's it.
So,
well, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But you can play it down, because it is for TV. So yeah, you do have to swallow your pride a bit, I think, and try to come up with a good backstory. Like in hindsight, if I had to do it, I've been on all sorts of shows, and you always want to come across as Mr. Professional, and you've been doing this, you're great. But yeah, probably for TV, you have to come up with something. And as Sam said, try to ground it on reality. So maybe it could be as simple as, oh yeah, I thought of giving up. Thought I did everything I needed to do, and I just got disenchanted. I was going to give it all away, and then this came along.
Exactly. I mean, look, and a classic example, even if you can't come up with a backstory, is my good friends Tommy Ten and Emily, who I work with in The Illusionist. They just auditioned for America's Got Talent. They're doing really, really well. On their audition, the judges said, so who are you? What do you do? And they said, well, we do this act for friends and family at home, maybe some parties. They've just won the FISM World Championships for mentalism, and they're in the biggest magic show on the planet. They're the best in the world, but they played the real humble card. And as though, well, we just thought maybe if we did America's Got Talent, maybe, we could, get to the next level. And, so they didn't really have a backstory as such, but they played it so humble, as though they really just kind of did this for friends. Meanwhile, the world, has no idea they're international world champions at what they do. So that's another way of approaching it too.
All right, great, Sam. Maybe as we say goodbye, could you just tell everyone, how they can connect with you, where they can watch your videos or get out on social media?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the website is sampowers.com.au. We've got Twitter, which is Sam Powers Magic, Instagram, Sam Powers Illusionist. I've got a YouTube channel. All the buttons are on my website at sampowers.com.au anyway. Constantly adding new videos to the YouTube channel. So yeah, drop in, say good day, and yeah, hope to hear from you.
Okay, guys, so do check out Sam Powers. If you're more interested, on information on working magic for TV, check out the show notes of this webinar. I've also got a video course out on performing magic for television, street, and studio, where I share all my experience. I even have my whole street magic TV series out. I do a commentary, give you behind the scenes, and that whole product's about 3 hours long. So lots of content. You can check that out. All right, my name is JC Sum, and I hope to see you